The storm raged all night, and the pirate ship Scarlet Scourge struggled to endure in the tempest. Lightning flashed across the sky, thunder roared like an enraged titan, and waves rolled in like hungry beasts, threatening to engulf the ship and its ruthless crew. However, at dawn, it became apparent that the Scarlet Scourge had survived, albeit bearing scars from its encounter with the sea. As the weary pirates surveyed the aftermath of the storm, their gaze fell upon a distant silhouette on the horizon. It was a merchant ship, adrift and helpless, with torn sails and broken masts. A malicious grin appeared on the face of Captain Harlow, a notorious pirate with a reputation as merciless as the sea itself. The prospect of potential easy plunder infused the entire crew of cutthroats with renewed strength. Despite their fatigue, the pirates eagerly launched the dinghies and energetically took up the oars. When they boarded the ship, they were met with eerie silence and an empty deck scattered with debris and wooden fragments of various junk. However, upon entering the cargo hold, their joy knew no bounds. Enormous crates of exotic spices, chests with valuable goods, and silk lay untouched. But there was no sign of the ship's crew anywhere. Suspicion lingered in the air as the pirates explored the dark corners of the hold. In one dimly lit cabin, they stumbled upon a collection of elaborately adorned chests. Intrigued, the pirates opened the first chest and found a dazzling array of treasures: diamonds, rubies, sapphires, and pearls. Their greedy eyes gleamed as they uncovered more and more treasures. However, when they opened the last massive chest, their greedy hearts froze in shock. There, amidst the sparkling gems, lay the body of a young woman. She possessed an otherworldly beauty, with hair the color of blackwood cascading down her pale shoulders. Her skin was as smooth as ivory, her lips as red as blood, and her closed eyes, adorned with long lashes, seemed like windows to a fairy tale world. Captain Harlow, despite his cruelty and ruthlessness, was captivated by her beauty. His cold gaze softened for a moment. "She's worth more than all the treasures in the world," declared the captain. The crew nodded in agreement, and he decided to keep the girl with them, assuming her to be dead. They placed her in a separate cabin, away from the revelry. As the sun set, casting the sea in a crimson glow, the pirates celebrated their newly acquired wealth, forgetting about the mysterious, lifeless passenger. With the onset of night, the drunken marauders dispersed to their corners, some falling asleep inebriated on the deck. The captain, taking a partially consumed bottle of rum with him, descended into his chambers. Seated in a chair near his cluttered table, filled with the various papers and navigation charts he used, he wearily closed his eyes. Harlow began to drift into sleep when a sudden noise jolted him awake. A cold shiver ran down the spine of the fearless cutthroat. On his bed sat the lifeless girl. Harlow froze, his mouth agape. It was unclear how long he sat in the silent stillness, but then the lifeless beauty abruptly stood up, reaching out towards the captain. Startled, Harlow somersaulted out of his chair and found himself in a corner, clutching his musket, trembling hands pointed at the lifeless stranger. In the air hung a sense of foreboding. A gentle breeze rustled the curtains in the cabin, where an unspoken scene unfolded. The maiden in the middle of the cabin and the frightened captain in the corner with a loaded musket. The girl stood, unafraid of the weapon, smiling her beautiful yet unsettling smile. There was something horrifying and simultaneously captivating about her face. Her emerald green eyes, like precious stones, met his gaze. With a soft, melodic voice, she whispered, "Who are you? Where am I?" The pirate, dumbstruck with amazement, couldn't utter a single word. Several minutes passed, or perhaps even more. The passage of time dissolved for Harlow. It ceased to exist. It's uncertain how long it would have continued, but then the revived stranger made a sudden movement forward, and a gunshot rang out. The entire cabin was filled with smoke, and the scent of burnt gunpowder permeated the space. The gunshot was heard. The sounds of about a dozen running footsteps followed. With the cabin door swung open, the astonished pirates were greeted with an unusual sight. The captain, pale as chalk, standing in the corner of his cabin, and the revived stranger, unscathed and looking quite rosy compared to the captain. The beauty in a gorgeous, expensive dress evoked very mixed feelings in the pirates who were dumbfounded by such news. It was a sense of reverential fear before something deep, mysterious, and unknown. Before some infernal sensation and admiration for this earthly beauty and femininity. This silent scene was finally interrupted by the voice of the beautiful stranger. "I welcome all of you, my liberators. I was a prisoner on that ship, which, fortunately, you discovered and rescued me from perishing in this boundless ocean." Her voice was enchantingly gentle and, at the same time, very noble. Judging by her attire and manners, this girl came from a very noble lineage. All her behaviors attested to it. After the girl spoke, she introduced herself as Saraphina and told the story of her appearance on that abandoned ship, where she ended up not by her own will, but was abducted by a very influential person who forcibly wanted to marry her. All the pirates disapproved with a disapproving murmur, apparently forgetting for a moment that they themselves were robbers and bandits. Finally, even the captain himself emerged from his protective corner. His face once again took on its fierce look, and there was no trace of his indecision. A few hours after this, the scene on the pirate ship underwent a radical change. The entire crew, led by captain and our freed captive, moved to the huge hold of the ship. There, around a massive table and large chests serving as tables, the revelry unfolded once again. This time there was no fights or clashes. On the contrary, the enormous sailors behaved casually and rejoiced like little children. They sang songs and danced, giving impressions that everyone had gone mad. Each of the ruffians tried to present themselves in the best light before the beauty sitting next to the captain, who alone did not participate in the festivities but watched each of his charges with malice and jealousy. The next day, the captain woke up well past noon. The sun was already high, scorching so intensely that he concluded they must have unexpectedly found themselves near the equator. However, this couldn't be true, as just days ago they were at the latitude of 20 degrees. It was impossible for a ship to reach the equator overnight, covering hundreds of miles, yet the captain's concerns weren't about their location. Firstly, he couldn't recall how yesterday's revelry had ended and how he ended up in his cabin. Secondly, he couldn't find his beautiful companion anywhere. It might have been presumptuous and premature to consider her his own, but Harlow believed that as a captain, he deserved the best. And he had earned it through strength, agility, and cunning, shedding both his own blood and others to become who he was now. He had killed scores of men. This beauty would be his, he had decided, and woe betide anyone who stood in his way. However, as time passed, he couldn't find his beauty anywhere. She was nowhere to be found. A dozen sailors from his pirate crew were also missing from the deck. The remaining crew searched the entire ship repeatedly, but there were no results. Harlow began to suspect something terrible had happened, and perhaps his failed lover had been killed and thrown overboard by drunken pirates fighting over her. He interrogated the entire crew, but no one, including himself, remembered anything. Harlow was infuriated. He didn't know what to do, didn't trust anyone, and suspected that the pirates had conspired against him. His mind feverishly contemplated ways to navigate this situation. Understanding that something devilish was afoot, he decided to return to his cabin and prepare for a fight if the mutineers decided to overthrow him. He had about a dozen people on his side, those he could trust, including his assistant, the boatswain, old Jack. He'd sailed the seas with Jack for over a decade, so he trusted him the most. As for the rest, each owed Harlow their lives. Whether he saved them from the gallows, bought them from slave traders, or spared their lives in a bandit skirmish, giving orders to the entire crew and stationing reliable sailors outside the cabin, the captain secluded himself in his quarters, preparing for a potential storm. Time flew by, and evening arrived. Unnoticed by himself, Harlow fell asleep in his chair. He had a dream. He rarely dreamt. And this dream felt so vivid, as if it were happening in reality. Saraphina, the beautiful woman, and he were in bed making love. Everything was so real that Harlow could smell her, feel the smoothness of her satin skin, immerse himself in the thick strands of her silky hair. He was in a state of bliss, feeling so good a sensation he could hardly remember, enveloped in a dense, sweet fog. He didn't want to wake up. He only wished for it to last for eternity, completely dissolving into the ecstasy of love. And at the very peak of ecstasy, just as he was about to soar into the pinnacle of amorous euphoria, he suddenly woke up. Or rather, he was forced to, as the thunderous noise and creaking of the door to his cabin couldn't leave even the deaf indifferent. Beyond the door, horrifying screams, curses, and gunfire resounded. Harlow jumped to his feet, grabbing the saber from his sheath, holding a pistol in one hand, another in his belt, ready for action. The captain rushed to the cabin door. It wobbled but held. He heard Jack shouting, and he was ready to fling the door open and rush to his old friend's aid when suddenly, behind the door, a terrifying roar echoed. It was a roar, the growl of some beast, something no human could produce. Harlow, a man who had seen it all, hesitated for a moment. And then he heard Jack's cry, a deathly scream, the final cry of his friend. Forgetting about the danger, the captain tore the door open and leaped into the dark expanse of the hold. Nothing was visible. Only the smell of gunpowder and blood, fiery flashes here and there, and the cries of his dying sailors as they were attacked by shadowy enemies. Something incomprehensible was happening on his ship. Dark figures only remotely resembling humans flickered before Harlow's bewildered eyes. He fired a few shots at them, but all missed. The shadows moved very quickly. Then he drew his saber and swung it right and left at the elusive enemy. It was all futile. He couldn't do anything against these shadows. In the corner he saw Jack lying and a sailor leaning over him doing something unimaginable. He was biting the old man's neck and emitting a horrible growl. Overwhelmed by rage, Harlow's reason was clouded, and with a few leaps he found himself next to this lover of human flesh. With one powerful blow, he severed the man-eater's cervical vertebrae. The cannibal silently slumped to the side. And then the captain's head rang like a bell. A terrible, dull pain from the powerful blow enveloped him entirely. His legs gave way, and slowly, as if in a dream, he settled on the floor. The last thing Harlow saw before his fading gaze was Saraphina's face, twisted with fury and smeared with blood. Time stood still. When Harlow opened his eyes, he found himself in the dark hold, where he and about a dozen surviving pirates from his crew lay. His head and body still ached, but the pain was now bearable, and the captain attempted to stand. To his surprise, he wasn't bound, and neither were any of the members of his crew. Soon, his eyes adjusted to the darkness, and Harlow began to distinguish faces, recognizing his sailors. Everyone was alive and relatively well. Their wounds were minor, and someone had already taken the trouble to clean and bandage the injured. Harlow looked around and began questioning his people about the events of the previous day. According to the sailors, the following picture emerged. Late in the evening after sunset, Saraphina and a dozen missing pirates appeared on the deck from somewhere unknown. They looked very strange and behaved unusually. Their sudden appearance shocked everyone, and before someone could send the captain to interrogate them thoroughly, it was already too late. The newcomers appearing out of nowhere scattered on the deck, and then simultaneously attacked the sailors. A brawl ensued. Some managed to grab weapons, others barricaded themselves, but mostly all resistance was quickly broken. The attackers moved and fought like wild beasts. It was challenging to hit them, and even a gunshot couldn't kill them. The most frightening part was that Saraphina was leading all of this. And she killed with such ease that no pirate could boast of. As Captain Harlow absorbed the chilling account of the events, a mixture of disbelief and anger welled up within him. Saraphina, the captivating beauty he had considered his own, was revealed to be something far more sinister. The ship that had seemed like a stroke of fortune had, in fact, become a nightmare. With a grim determination, Harlow gathered his surviving crew in the dimly lit hold, the flickering lanterns casting long shadows, accentuating the weariness and fear etched on their faces. The captain's voice through the heavy air commanding attention. "We're dealing with something unnatural, something beyond our understanding," Harlow declared, his eyes scanning the faces of his hardened crew. "Our only chance is to find a way to break whatever curse has befallen us and rid ourselves of this menace." The pirates, though shaken, nodded in agreement. The realization that they were facing a force beyond the scope of their pirate exploits hung heavy in the air. Harlow took charge, organizing a plan to investigate the origins of Saraphina and her cursed companions. As the crew scoured the ship for clues, they discovered a hidden compartment in the box that Saraphina herself came in. There were ancient texts and arcane symbols, ones that to most were unreadable. But Harlow, after a long life at sea and many a land visited, was able to piece together some meaning from this. It became evident that the abandoned merchant ship carried more than just treasures. It bore the remnants of a dark ritual gone awry. The pirates pieced together the fragments of information, unveiling a story of forbidden magic and an attempt to harness otherworldly powers. Powers of the dead brought back. Harlow, fueled by a sense of responsibility and a desire for redemption, delved into this forbidden knowledge. Guided by the cryptic writings, he learnt that the curse could only be lifted by one of a few ways: wood through the heart, exposure to the sun, the tooth and claws of other beasts, or by that most destructive of forces, fire. The pirates, armed with newfound determination and a blend of makeshift weapons, clung to the surface of the ship in the daylight, and, led by their captain, devised a plan and set sail for the merchant vessel. as if by fate, they found the ship not 5 nautical miles away from their own, perhaps carried by Poseidon himself to assist in their battle. Quickly the pirates spurred to action, setting about laying their trap. As night came and nerves frayed, they steeled together and readied themselves for another fight. Each of the surviving individuals was set about to do a task, preparing for Harlow's plan to be sprung, though Captain Harlow himself would go about the most dangerous task, luring out the fiends from the hull. Though his heart pounded in his chest and the whispers sent a chill up his spine, he descended into the darkness of the hold, venturing forth to find Saraphina and her horde of changed. With a torch in hand and a pistol in the other, he carefully made his way through the hold, following the sounds of the whispers to their strongest source. Before long the man was guided to his own bedchambers, to which the doors were slightly ajar. Taking in a deep breath, Harlow pushed the door open to see the beautiful Saraphina sat upon his bed, her blood-red lips curled into a smile, her arms stretched out in a beckoning embrace, and for a moment Harlow forgot himself, longing again for the embrace he felt once in his dream. "My dear Captain, can you not see that I do not want you dead? If I did, why would I have healed you?" The pistol fell limp at his side as he started to walk in a trance towards this beautiful woman. She truly was a visage. No woman had ever held his attention quite like her, and with each step towards her, he felt his heart pound harder, the emerald in her eyes appearing to deepen. "Come, my captain," she said with a smile that revealed her teeth. Teeth that were far too sharp for a woman so regal and beautiful. His mind flashed back to what he read, of these creatures using humans as living larders, keeping them alive and healthy, in order to preserve them like a fine wine. The beating in the captain's heart grew stronger, but not from lust or love, but from fury, as he remembered his oldest friend, Jack, lying there being fed upon by one of these monstrosities that she had spawned. Like a flash of lightning, he reared back his pistol and fired, causing the she-beast to reel back and hiss before unleashing a powerful roar. The captain had no time to waste. He remembered his plan and began his wild sprint towards the top of his ship. He heard the bellows of more creatures as he ran and felt the air slice behind him, narrowly missing the heel of his boots. He flew up the stairs and onto the deck of his ship, almost slipping on the now wet wood, as the scent of alcohol pervaded his senses. Looking around, he saw no one on board, just as he had instructed. With no time to catch his breath, he ran to the edge of the ship, leaping into the air and down into the cold waters of the ocean. Or at least that's what he expected. Instead, he found himself floating above the water, his legs kicking helplessly, before he realized he was ensnared in the arm of a powerful creature. She turned him around to face him, clutching his throat as she spoke in words laced with a venom and hatred so deep it made the ocean's trenches seem shallow. "You could have lived for at least another week or two. But instead, you choose to anger me. A mistake you will not make again." Although the captain was ensnared in this creature's grasp, he attempted to speak, and perhaps out of some curiosity on her part, Saraphina relaxed her grasp enough to allow him to. "What driveling last words do you have to say to me, Captain?" Do you wish to beg for your life?
Not at all, lass. The only reason I went to find you is because I needed to say goodbye.
The old captain smiled as he released the torch from his hand. As soon as the flames made contact with the alcohol-soaked wood, it ignited like oil, sending a cascading blaze across the ship, enveloping the horde of undead, and, most importantly, Saraphina, who shrieked with an inhuman wail like a banshee, unleashing her grasp on the captain, who descended into the waves below. The cries and wails of the damned could be heard as the captain made his way to the smaller merchant vessel, now repaired with his survivors on board. As he was fished out of the cold waters by his men, Captain Harlow made one last glance towards his ship, and towards the flailing humanoid shapes that ran about its bows, shrieking and hollering, somehow unable to descend into the cooling waters of the ocean below, as if some unseen force prevented them from crossing into the flowing waves. The captain sat there, soaked, legs dangling overboard. He sighed deeply. Goodbye, my love. And goodbye to that undead bitch as well.